My name is Rebecca Turner, and I am 34 years old. The strange thing about the night my entire life changed is that it began so quietly wrapped in the familiar glow of Christmas Eve at my parents' house in suburban Chicago. The fireplace crackled, reflecting off the rows of half-empty wine glasses. The kids were still buzzing from the morning's presents, the adults sinking into that soft holiday haze, and for a moment it felt like every other Christmas we'd ever had. Until it didn't. Amanda, my older sister, by 2 years, my first best friend, my longest rival, lifted her glass in what I'd later recognize as a calculated move. Her smile was sharp enough to slice through the warm air. To my wonderful sister, she said brightly, looking directly at me, always so busy with her important job that she barely has time for family anymore. The room temperature dropped. I could feel it. Even the pine-scented candles seemed to flicker with discomfort. Kevin, her husband, shifted in his seat. Their kids, Grace and Tyler, 9 and 7, kept playing with their new toys, oblivious. Mom set down her coffee cup a little too carefully. "That's not fair," I said, trying to keep my voice even. I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. "I was here for Thanksgiving. I came to Grace's school play last month." Amanda laughed, a hollow, brittle sound. "Oh, please. You showed up 40 minutes late to the play and left before it ended. You're always running off to some meeting or conference. Just admit it, you choose your career over everything else." Dad cleared his throat. That meant drop it. But Amanda wasn't done. She never was not when she got like this wine-loosened resentment bubbling too close to the surface. "Honestly, I dare you to disappear for a few days and see if anyone even notices you're gone. We'd probably have a more relaxing holiday without you checking your phone every 5 minutes." Silence. Real silence. The kind that expands and tightens around your lungs. Mom gasped softly. Dad looked mortified. Kevin stared at the table. The kids kept playing, blissfully unaware their aunt had just been told she was disposable. Something inside me clicked. Not snapped clicked. Like a puzzle piece finally sliding into place after being jammed in the wrong spot for years. "All right," I heard myself say. "I accept your challenge." Amanda blinked. "What?" "Your dare." I stood pulling my coat from the back of the chair with hands steadier than I felt. "I accept it. I'll disappear. And we'll see what happens." Rebecca Mom started. "Merry Christmas, everyone." I walked out before anyone could respond, aware of the stunned silence collapsing behind me. Outside, the December air slapped my face, and only then did the tremor in my hands begin. My phone rang nonstop on the drive back to my apartment in Lincoln Park. I didn't answer. Not Mom, not Dad, not the repeated calls. I stepped into my apartment, turned off my phone entirely, and sat in the dark for a long, long time. Amanda had always resented me. I had known it intellectually, but knowing something is different from feeling it land like a punch in the chest. She got pregnant at 21, married Kevin quickly, and built her life around their home and kids. I finished my MBA and climbed the corporate ladder at Morrison Financial. 70-hour weeks, million-dollar negotiations, client flights to New York and Los Angeles. From the outside, it looked glamorous. To her, it probably looked easy, effortless. But glamour hides a lot. Panic attacks in office bathrooms, meals skipped because meetings ran long, weeks lost to exhaustion, birthdays missed, silence in an apartment that never stopped feeling temporary. I'd worked for everything I had. Amanda only ever saw the surface. What she didn't know was that I'd been planning something, quietly, carefully, for months. Her dare didn't cause the implosion. It simply accelerated it. Christmas Day passed in surreal peace. I ordered Chinese takeout, watched old movies, and made lists, pages and pages of lists. Options, plans, timelines, consequences. By Monday morning, I was sitting across from Morrison Financial's senior partners. By Wednesday, I'd negotiated my exit package, 6 months severance, full benefits through the year, and a glowing letter of recommendation that felt strangely like a eulogy. Everyone looked relieved. Burnout had been carving itself into my face for months. I didn't tell my family. My phone remained off, filling with messages I refused to read. Guilt gnawed at me, especially when I pictured my mom in tears. But the space was necessary, unavoidable. The quiet of my apartment felt like oxygen for the first time in years. On Thursday, I made the call I'd been avoiding: Natasha, my college roommate, Portland transplant, persistent recruiter, hope in human form. "Please tell me you're serious," she said, after I asked if her offer still stood. "Dead serious," I replied. "I need a change, Tasha. A big one." We talked for 2 hours. She needed my financial expertise. The job paid less, much less, but came with something I hadn't had in years: balance. Humanity. I can start in 3 weeks, I said, but I have something to take care of first. Natasha didn't hesitate. Done. Just like that, a new life formed in front of me, quiet, glowing, full of possibility. The next morning, I finally turned my phone back on. The notifications exploded: 47 missed calls, 32 voicemails, texts that filled screens. Most were from Mom, Dad too, Kevin, even Aunt Rachel. But one name was missing: Amanda. Not once, not a single message, not one moment of concern that maybe I'd actually vanished. Something cold settled in my chest, a clarity sharper than anger. She wanted to see what happened if I disappeared. Fine. She would see exactly what my disappearance looked like. I called Mom first. She answered on the first ring voice, shaking with relief. "Oh, thank God, Rebecca, where have you been? We've been worried sick." "I'm okay, Mom. I just needed space." Space. "You disappeared on Christmas Eve. Your father and I were about to call the police." I apologized. Guilt flooded in. But for the first time, I didn't let it drown me. Dad called next. Practical, calm, focused. "Are you safe?" he asked. "I'm safe," I said. Then hesitated. "Actually, I need your help with something big. You remember those stocks Grandma left me?" "Of course, they've appreciated nicely." "I want to cash them out. All of them. And I need you to help me set up a trust." He paused. "What kind of trust?" "For Grace and Tyler." And then after a breath, "But Amanda and Kevin can't touch a dime." Dad listened. He asked careful questions. And when I explained the conditions: GPA requirements, accredited, schools funds paid directly to institutions, he exhaled slowly. "This is incredibly generous," he said. "But, Rebecca, your sister." "Did Amanda ask about me?" I asked quietly. "At all." A long pause. "No," he said finally. "She didn't." "Exactly." That week became a blur of paperwork, legal documents, movers' notices, and the beginning of my exit from Chicago. The trust fund, $340,000, was secured. Ironclad. Protected from Amanda's control. 2 weeks after Christmas, the family insisted we meet for dinner. Amanda didn't text me. Not once. Not even to ask if I was alive. I should have expected it. I still felt the sting. But I went anyway. With a new life waiting in Portland. With a trust fund waiting for 2 innocent kids. With a truth Amanda was about to hear whether she wanted to or not. The days after reconnecting with my parents were a strange mix of calm determination and emotional whiplash. I'd made my decision. I was moving to Portland, and nothing, certainly not Amanda's dare, was going to derail the fresh start I desperately needed. But before I could actually leave, I had to tie up every loose thread that tethered me to Chicago. The first thread was the trust. Dad and I spent hours reviewing documents, discussing legal structures, and ensuring that every clause protected Grace and Tyler's future without giving Amanda or Kevin control over a dime. I knew how it would look like an indictment of Amanda's priorities, and maybe in some small way it was. But beneath my anger was something softer, a memory of Grace running to hug me at her school play, the way Tyler's eyes lit up when he explained dinosaur facts, the realization that their futures shouldn't be limited by the dysfunction between their mother and me. Dad sat across from me at his dining table one evening. Papers spread out between us. "Your grandmother would be proud of this," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You're using what she left you to give the kids opportunities she never had." Maybe I said tracing the edge of a signature line. Or maybe it's just easier to love people who haven't hurt you. He looked up sharply. "Rebecca, I'm not trying to be cruel," I said. I don't know how to feel about Amanda anymore. Some days I feel nothing. Some days I feel everything." Dad folded his hands. "Your sister is complicated. You are too. But this," he tapped the trust documents, "this is something only a person with a good heart does." I didn't feel like someone with a good heart. I felt like someone desperately trying not to drown. By the end of the week, the trust was finalized. Ironclad, untouchable, and deeply symbolic in ways I hadn't yet admitted. It was my parting gift, my proof that leaving didn't mean abandoning the people who mattered. The next step was telling my family. Not about the trust yet, but about Portland. Mom asked us all to meet for dinner at a nice Italian restaurant in Oak Park. Neutral ground, she'd said, as if she were arranging peace talks between 2 feuding countries. When I arrived that night, everyone was already seated. Amanda looked up when I walked in. For a split second, just a flicker, I thought I saw worry in her eyes. Then it disappeared beneath a stiff smile. "Well," she said with a shrug, "look who decided to show up." Kevin murmured Amanda, but she ignored him. I didn't respond. I simply sat down, feeling the weight of every unsaid word hovering between us. Mom leaned forward, hands clasped. Honey, we're just glad you're here, and we're glad you're safe. Actually, I said, inhaling slowly, I wanted to talk to you all about something important. Amanda's eyes narrowed, as if bracing herself for judgment, criticism, or retaliation. It was strange realizing she expected me to deliver the same cruelty she'd shown me, like she couldn't fathom any other way of relating. I quit my job, I said, and I'm moving to Portland in 4 days. Silence. Not the heavy, suffocating kind from Christmas Eve. This one felt lighter, like the air itself was trying to rearrange itself around this new truth. Mom gasped. Dad nodded unsurprised. Kevin blinked. Aunt Rachel smiled faintly. Amanda froze. You quit Morrison Financial, she said, each word slow and disbelieving. Are you insane? People beg to work there, Rebecca. You don't just walk away from that. I did, I said, because it was killing me. Amanda scoffed. Oh, please. This is about what I said at Christmas, isn't it? You're being dramatic. No, I said gently. I'm being honest. The tension tightened around us like invisible string. You told me to disappear, I continued. So I did. And you know what I learned. I looked directly at her. You never called. Not once. Everyone else worried. You didn't. Amanda swallowed hard. For a moment, her facade slipped. I was giving you space, she said quietly. I didn't ask for space, I replied. I asked for respect, for understanding, for a relationship that didn't revolve around passive-aggressive digs or comparisons or assumptions about my life. Her shoulders tensed. You think my life's been easy, she snapped. You think I haven't envied you. You with your job and your apartment and your freedom. Freedom, I said, stunned. You call 70-hour weeks, panic attacks, skipped meals, and constant loneliness freedom. She blinked as if my words didn't fit the image she'd built of me. I'm leaving Chicago, I said, because I want to start over, because I need to. For the first time, Amanda looked shaken. Fine, she said, go. Mom started to say something, but I held up a hand. Not to silence her, but because I wasn't done. Before I go, there's something else you should know. I looked at Amanda, then at Kevin, about Grace and Tyler. Kevin sat up straighter. Amanda's eyes widened, not in fear, but recognition, as if she sensed a shift happening beneath the surface. I cashed out Grandma's stocks, I said, and I set up an educational trust for the kids. Mom gasped. Dad stared at his plate. Aunt Rachel covered her mouth. Amanda's expression splintered into disbelief. What she whispered, it'll pay for college tuition, books, housing. Everything. Why would you do that? Amanda said, her voice cracking. After everything I've said to you, why? Because I love them, I wanted to say. Because they deserve opportunities we didn't have. Because I refuse to let our brokenness become theirs. But the truth was layered, love, guilt, resentment, hope too tangled to name. Instead, I said, because they deserve it. Amanda's eyes filled. Real tears. Not anger, not performative, just raw grief and confusion and something else understanding maybe. Kevin put a hand over his mouth, his eyes glistening. I can't accept this, Amanda whispered. You don't have to, I said. It's already done. You don't control it, but you can't stop it either. She flinched at that. The waiter arrived to take our order, oblivious to the emotional wreckage spread across the table. We all pretended to read our menus while trying to collect ourselves. The dinner continued in awkward fragments of conversation. Amanda barely spoke. Twice she wiped tears from her cheeks when she thought no one was looking. When the plates were cleared and the check paid, she finally spoke again, softly like a confession. I'm sorry, she said, for Christmas, for all of it. I believed her. For the first time, I genuinely believed her. But belief isn't the same as repair. I'm sorry too, I said quietly, for disappearing the way I did, for shutting you out, for not seeing how overwhelmed you were. We sat there, neither touching the fragile peace between us, but both recognizing it. A beginning. That night, when I returned home to my half-packed apartment, I looked around at the life I'd built over 10 years. It felt like a museum exhibit, now beautiful, curated, and completely detached from the person I'd become. In 4 days, I'd be gone. In 4 days, I'd be free. The days leading up to my move passed in a blur, boxes stacked in corners. Movers confirmed utilities scheduled for shutoff. My apartment echoed more, with every item I packed, each hollow footstep reminding me that this life, this version of myself, was about to become a memory. But even as I folded clothes into suitcases and sorted through old documents, I couldn't stop replaying fragments of the dinner conversation. Amanda's whispered apology, the way Kevin squeezed her shoulder, Mom's trembling gratitude, Dad's pride. Underneath it all was something I had never felt before, not victory, not vindication. Just sadness and a strange, fragile hope. On the morning of my last full day in Chicago, I drove across the city through neighborhoods I'd barely had time to notice these past few years. The skyline looked different when you weren't rushing past it. Softer, almost forgiving. I spent the afternoon at my parents' house letting Mom fuss over me while Dad reviewed the final trust documents one more time just to be safe. Amanda wasn't there, neither was Kevin. Mom said they were still processing. I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't ask. That evening, Amanda asked through the family group chat if she and Kevin could stop by my apartment. A simple message. No exclamation marks, no sarcastic barbs. Just, can we come talk? I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing, come by at 7. At 7:02, there was a knock. When I opened the door, Amanda stood on the threshold holding a small paper bag, looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. Kevin hovered behind her, hands deep in his coat pockets. Hi, she said. Hey, I replied. She stepped inside and immediately looked around at the half-empty apartment, her expression tightening. Wow, you really are leaving. I told you I was. No, I know, it feels real now. Kevin gave me a sad smile. Hey, Rebecca. Hey, Kev. Amanda set the bag on the kitchen counter and crossed her arms, a defensive gesture that contradicted the apology still sitting fragile and unspoken in her eyes. I brought cookies. I don't know why. Mom said you like them, but whatever, it's stupid. It's not stupid, I said quietly. She nodded once, then exhaled shakily. Look, I know we talked at dinner, but I didn't say everything I needed to say. I braced myself without meaning to. Old habits. Kevin put a hand on her back. Go on, he murmured. Amanda looked at the boxes, then at me. I was so angry at Christmas. Angry at you. Angry at myself. Angry at the world. Her voice trembled. But the thing I didn't admit was that I wasn't just angry, I was jealous. I didn't interrupt, I just let her speak. You gotta build a career, she said. You gotta travel, be independent, make choices. I spent my 20s raising kids and clipping coupons while Kevin worked nights. And every time I saw you in one of those suits or heard you talking about your job, it felt like you were living the life I lost. Kevin lowered his head. He looked hurt by her honesty, but he didn't flinch from it. I made it into this competition, Amanda continued. You versus me. Success versus struggle. Freedom versus responsibility. And that's not fair. It wasn't fair then, and it isn't fair now. She wiped her eye quickly. But when you walked out on Christmas Eve, it scared me. Not immediately. I was too proud and too drunk to admit it. But the next morning when you still hadn't called, I panicked. But I told myself you'd come back. You always came back. I wasn't sure I would, I said softly. I know, she whispered. And that's what hurt. Not because you disappeared, but because I pushed you so hard that disappearing felt like the only option you had. The room felt impossibly quiet. Even the hum of the heater seemed to fall away. Kevin stepped in. We should have checked on you. I should have checked on you. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I swallowed around the tightness in my throat. Thank you. Amanda took a small step closer. And the trust fund. Her voice cracked. That was the kindest, most painful thing anyone has ever done for my kids. And I didn't deserve it. I still don't. You don't have to deserve it, I said. It's not about you. It's about Grace and Tyler. I know. She wiped her cheek again. But I want you to know, I'm grateful, truly, and I'm trying to do better. I didn't have a neat packaged response. Just honesty. I know you are, I said, and I'm trying too. For a moment, we simply stood there. The air between us no longer sharp, but fragile, as if a single hard word could shatter the tentative peace forming between us. Amanda took a breath. I'm not asking you to stay. I know you need to go, but I hope one day you'll come back. Not permanently, just visit. Be part of our lives again. I want that, I said. I do. She nodded slowly as if absorbing a truth she didn't quite expect to hear. When they left, Amanda hugged me stiff at first, then with a sudden fierce sincerity that surprised both of us. Kevin hugged me too, murmuring, Take care of yourself, okay? Take. I will, I promised. The next morning, my last morning in Chicago, Mom and Dad came over with donuts and coffee. Mom cried when she saw the empty apartment. Dad tried to hide his emotion behind small talk about traffic and weather, but his voice cracked too. They helped me pack the final box. They watched as the movers hauled the last pieces of my old life out the door. And when we finally stood in the echo of what used to be my living room, Mom pressed her forehead to mine and whispered, Come home when you can. Not because we need you, but because we love you. Dad slipped an envelope into my hand before they left. Inside was the check and his handwritten note. For your fresh start. Proud of you. That was when I cried, really cried, for the first time since Christmas Eve. Hours later, with everything loaded and my apartment stripped bare, I took one final walk through the empty rooms. The walls still held shadows of memories, but nothing of me remained. As I stepped out and locked the door behind me, a strange weight lifted. I wasn't disappearing anymore. I was leaving. There's a difference. That evening, as I started the long drive west toward Portland, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, tired, tear-streaked, but unmistakably lighter. For the first time in years, I felt something that didn't belong to Amanda, or my job, or my family's expectations. I felt free. Portland greeted me with rain. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind, just a steady, misty drizzle that felt strangely comforting, like the sky was exhaling on my behalf. When I pulled into my new neighborhood in the Hawthorne district, tired from 3 days of driving, Natasha was already waiting on the sidewalk with 2 coffees and a smile so bright it cut through the gray. Welcome home, she said, handing me a mug. Home. The word hit harder than I expected. My new apartment was smaller than my place in Chicago, but it had character. Arched doorways, creaking floors, tall windows with views of the neighborhood trees, and a faint scent of cedar from the previous tenant. Natasha helped me carry boxes inside, and by evening, the living room was filled with stacks of cardboard and the low hum of rain against the glass. You okay? She asked, leaning against the doorway. I think so, I said, or I will be. The truth was, I felt like a balloon, untethered, weightless, drifting unsure whether the freedom was exhilarating or terrifying. Maybe both. Work with Natasha started that Monday. Her boutique consulting firm was exactly what she'd promised: collaborative, human, slower paced, but still intellectually challenging. My first project involved helping a local food cooperative restructure its finances. Instead of discussing profit margins for multinational clients, I was helping small farms and community gardens stay afloat. For the first time in years, the work felt meaningful. I learned to take lunch breaks. I left the office before dark. I didn't wake up with dread curling in my stomach. The panic that once sat heavy on my chest began slowly to loosen its grip. On weekends, Natasha dragged me to farmers markets, coffee shops with plants hanging from the ceiling, and bookshops with cats named after dead poets. I joined a yoga studio. I started hiking. I learned to breathe again. 3 months passed before I realized that I no longer felt like I was running away from something. I was running towards something. That something arrived, of course, on a day when I least expected it. I met Marcus at a sustainable business conference. He worked in urban planning tall, with a calm presence and a smile that made time slow down a little. We were assigned to the same breakout group discussing green infrastructure, and he made a dry joke about city zoning laws that should not have been as funny as it was. After the session, he said, "Do you want to grab coffee or tea or something less Pacific Northwest?" "Coffee works," I said, trying to sound casual while absolutely failing. We talked for 2 hours. Then we met again the next week, and the week after that. Soon, weekend hikes became our thing. He knew every trail within 100 miles, and I learned that he carried granola bars like a human vending machine. "What about your family?" he asked one Saturday as we sat on a fallen log overlooking the Columbia River Gorge. I hesitated. Then, for reasons I didn't understand at the time, I told him everything. The Christmas dare, the disappearance, the burnout, the trust fund, Amanda. He listened quietly, nodding occasionally, never interrupting. "So she dared you to disappear," he said finally, "and you turned that into a new life." "Pretty much. That's either incredibly poetic," he said, "or incredibly badass." I laughed. It felt good to laugh again. Real laughter, not the brittle kind I'd perfected at work back in Chicago. "Do you think you'll ever move back?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Portland feels right in a way Chicago never did. But my family, I don't want to lose them." "You won't," he said gently. "You just needed space to become the person you're supposed to be." I hadn't realized until that moment how badly I needed someone to believe that. Meanwhile, Amanda began small, tentative reconnections. The first came through Mom. "She's going back to school," Mom said during one of our twice-weekly calls, enrolling part-time to finish her degree in elementary education. "That's great," I said, genuinely surprised. "Is she excited?" "Nervous. But I think she feels inspired. What happened at Christmas changed her too." It was strange realizing we were evolving in parallel, each on our own coast, each reclaiming the version of ourselves that had gone dormant during our 20s. A few weeks later, Amanda called me directly. I stared at the screen for a full 5 seconds before answering. "Hey," I said cautiously, Is this a good time? She asked. Yeah, what's up? I just wanted to say that I'm graduating in December, finishing what I started years ago. There was a shy pride in her voice. Kevin and I talked to Dad about the trust. We want to make sure we're teaching the kids the right values about money, responsibility, gratitude. That's good, I said softly. I'm glad. And Rebecca, her voice thickened. I know I said it before, but thank you for the kids, for everything. My throat tightened unexpectedly. They're good kids. They deserve it. They do, she said. And so do you. You deserve to be happy. After we hung up, I sat alone on my couch, feeling the slow, tentative healing that was taking root between us. Painful, but real, like scar tissue forming after a long injury. A few more months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Work hikes, laughter with Natasha, lazy afternoons with Marcus, Sunday calls with Mom, occasional sarcastic texts from Amanda, and photos of Grace at piano recitals, or Tyler showing off a volcano science project. Their faces began filling my phone the way spreadsheets once did. One summer weekend, I flew back to Chicago for Grace's 10th birthday party. The moment I stepped into my parents' backyard, Grace squealed and ran toward me, nearly knocking me over. Aunt Rebecca, she shouted. You came. Of course I came, I said, hugging her tightly. Wouldn't miss it. Amanda walked up a moment later, looking relaxed in jeans and a simple top. She smiled at me, warm and unforced, and we hugged gently naturally without the stiffness of past years. Thanks for being here, she said. Thanks for inviting me. We spent the afternoon together in a way we never had before, side by side, not competing. Not comparing, just existing in the same space without tension. Grace played piano for everyone. Tyler showed me his dinosaur drawings with intense seriousness. Kevin grilled burgers while Dad offered unhelpful advice. Mom hovered with lemonade refills. Aunt Rachel took photos. It was miraculously normal. Later, Amanda and I found ourselves alone on the back porch, watching the kids play tag in the yard. I think about that night a lot, she said, staring straight ahead. What I said to you at Christmas, how I dared you to disappear. It's okay, I said, because it finally was. No, she shook her head. Let me finish. I was hurt and insecure, and I lashed out. But you're disappearing. It woke us both up. You found a life that makes you happy, and I found the courage to change mine. I looked at her, feeling the truth in her words settle between us like a balm. So I guess she continued with a small laugh in a weird way. We both won. Or I said, smiling, we both lost the lives we thought we wanted and found something better. She nudged me with her shoulder. Okay, that's deep. Before I could respond, Grace called for us to join a game, and we returned to the party together. That night, flying back to Portland, I watched the city lights disappear beneath the clouds and realized something quietly profound. I no longer carried the weight of Chicago with me. I carried the people I loved, the healed parts, the hopeful parts, the possibility of something better than what had come before. My new life wasn't an escape anymore. It was a beginning. In the years that followed, my life unfolded in shapes I never imagined back in Chicago. Work in Portland remained steady and challenging in the way that filled me up instead of draining me. My connection with Marcus deepened into something real, balanced, and quietly transformative. And my relationship with Amanda, against all odds, softened into something that resembled not just peace, but genuine affection. Time didn't erase the scars between us. Instead, it carved them into something we could both understand. 3 months into my new life, Amanda called to tell me she was graduating. 6 months after that, she sent a picture of her classroom, her name on a placard, her students' drawings taped around the whiteboard. She looked happy in a way I had never seen before, grounded in her own identity, instead of one she felt trapped inside. Grace grew into a teenager with a musician's soul, quiet, observant fingers always tapping invisible piano keys on the table. Tyler's passion for dinosaurs morphed into an obsession with astronomy. Their curiosity had grown sharper, their confidence stronger, and they carried themselves with the knowledge that their futures were fully theirs to build. When I visited Chicago for their birthdays or holidays, the house was full of the kind of noisy, joyful chaos that used to overwhelm me. Now it felt like warmth, like belonging. Amanda and I no longer walked on eggshells around each other. We weren't best friends, we didn't need to be. But we were honest. We were trying. And for us, that was more meaningful than pretending to be perfect. Marcus became a steady part of my world. He had a way of making everything slower, easier, not by fixing my problems, but by sitting beside me while I worked through them. One evening, as we cooked dinner together, he looked at me over a pan of vegetables and said almost casually, You know, I think we make a pretty good team. I smiled at him. Yeah, I said, we do. 3 months later, on a quiet hiking trail overlooking Mount Hood, he knelt down and asked me to marry him. I said yes, with no hesitation, no doubt, no fear, not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in my life I felt like I was choosing joy over obligation. Our wedding was small, simple, beautiful in a way I hadn't expected. Mom cried, Dad danced, Aunt Rachel gave a toast full of embarrassing childhood stories, and Amanda stood beside me before the ceremony, smoothing the veil over my hair and whispering, "You deserve this, all of it." After the wedding, life didn't become a fairy tale, but it did become ours. Marcus and I adopted a dog who refused to understand the concept of personal space. We bought a house with enough room for both of our hobbies and our future. Sundays were for slow breakfast, neighborhood walks, and calls with Mom and Amanda. For the first time in years, my happiness wasn't a mask, it was a steady truth. Grace entered high school with a sense of purpose I envied. When she performed at a citywide competition, I watched the live stream from my living room in Portland. Her playing was raw and expressive, the kind of performance that didn't just show talent, it showed hunger, passion, potential. Later, Amanda texted me the video along with, "She's thinking about conservatories. We're helping her research. She'll need the trust soon. Thank you again." And for the first time, her gratitude didn't feel heavy or complicated. It felt shared, like something we had built together without meaning to. Years passed like that gracefully with room to breathe. One December, I flew back to Chicago for the holidays. The house looked the same from the outside, but everything inside had changed. Grace, now a conservatory-bound young woman, hugged me so tightly I nearly tripped. Tyler, now taller than me, talked nonstop about physics. Amanda and Kevin moved around the kitchen with the ease of a couple finally at peace with their lives. Mom and Dad looked older, softer, content. Amanda and I found ourselves alone in the living room, at one point sipping tea, while the others bundled up to help Dad put up Christmas lights. "You know," Amanda said, staring at the window, fogged with cold, "I think about that night a lot. The dare. How stupid I was. How much I hurt you." "It's okay," I said automatically, but this time she stopped me. "No. Let me finish." She turned toward me, her expression gentle. "You disappearing forced both of us to face things we were avoiding. You were burned out. I was unhappy. Neither of us knew how to ask for help." I nodded slowly. "Maybe we needed to break before we could rebuild." "Maybe," she said with a soft laugh. "We're both stubborn enough to require dramatic lessons." The kids shouted from outside, pulling our attention to the window. Dad was untangling lights in the snow, while Grace recorded him on her phone and Tyler argued about how voltage worked. Marcus stood beside them, in his thick winter coat, pretending not to shiver. Amanda smiled. "Look at us now," she whispered. "Who would have thought?" "Certainly not me," I admitted. "But I'm glad we got here." That night after dinner, when everyone was gathered in the living room with dessert and coffee, Amanda stood up with her glass raised. "I want to make a toast," she said. The room fell quiet. 4 years ago, I said something cruel to my sister, a dare that came from a place of resentment and insecurity. But what I didn't know then was that she would take that dare and use it to rebuild her life and without meaning to change ours. She looked directly at me. "You taught us what strength really looks like, what generosity means, what it is to choose happiness instead of expectations. I'm proud of you, Rebecca. I love you." My vision blurred and I stood to hug her. It wasn't a fragile hug or a stiff one. It was strong, merging years of pain and forgiveness into something we could finally carry together. Later, driving back to the hotel with Marcus, he reached for my hand across the console. "That was beautiful," he said. "It was," I whispered. "Your family has come so far." "So have I." He smiled. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you didn't take the dare?" I looked out the window as snow flurries drifted past the streetlights. "I think I would have burned out," I said quietly, completely. I might have lost myself entirely. Amanda's dare, as awful as it was, forced me to save my own life. "So she saved you," Marcus said. "No," I said, turning back to him. "I saved myself. She just gave me the push I needed." The next morning, before our flight, I stopped by Amanda's house alone. We sat at her kitchen table with coffee's soft morning light warming the walls. "I never properly thanked you," I said. She blinked. "For what?" "For hurting you. For helping me change," I said. "For pushing me out of a life that wasn't mine." Her eyes shimmered. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not," I said gently, "but I'm giving it anyway, because holding on to anger was exhausting, and I'm tired of being exhausted." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Be happy, Rebecca. That's all I want now. I am, I said. Finally, I really am. Years passed. Grace thrived at her music conservatory. Tyler began planning for astrophysics programs. The trust fund did exactly what it was meant to remove: obstacles, open doors, offer possibility. Amanda excelled as a teacher. Kevin found stability in his career. Mom and Dad slowed down content in a house filled with fading photographs and new memories. And Rebecca Turner, the woman who once disappeared because she didn't know how to exist, built a life defined not by escape, but by choice, by love, by purpose. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best changes. Sometimes cruelty reveals truth. Sometimes disappearing is the only way to find yourself. And sometimes the sister who dared you to leave becomes the one who is most grateful that you came back.